Yes, that was one of my other questions is how cathartical was because I listened to you talk about the auto fiction and I found it beautiful. So can we explore a little bit more about this concept and how did you develop it, writing it?
Um, this is a movie that before this point, I always wrote looking forward. It was me and a bunch of white papers that I had to go through it. And at the end of the story, at the end of the process, I would find the story. And here I was writing looking backward. It was an experience that I had gone through it. Now I had to just look and see how can I experiment, shape these personal narratives in a form that is cohesive for the screen of cinema. Um, it is not entirely documentary. It is based on truth. There is a lot of truth in there, but it's not entirely fiction either. So it's between the two. So it's not autobiography, it's not fiction, and it's a hybrid. So I call it autofiction. I borrowed that term from other writers. Um, was it cathartic? I think the you only can write when you already have gone through it. So if there was any healing, it had happened before. Therefore, I could pick the pen and write about it, right? The very act of writing it wasn't cathartic per se. It was more mm, scary. Should I open up this much to the world? Should I show to the audience this much of myself?
That's interesting. And also, how do you develop the time, the tempo, and the rhythm of the movie? I will really like to could you explore a little bit more on how did you think that timing and that rhythm of the movie?
Um, I usually edit standing, and I kind of uh, like a dancer. I have to feel it. I don't have really a way of articulating how I make that decision, but I feel the rhythm with my body, you know, and then I almost on my toes when I press the cut in one point or another. Also, I'm very aware that the film is demanding, so but I resist and restrain from giving a little what I call cheap dopamine. I don't want to. This is not a Netflix miniseries, right? That I constantly try to give you a little dopamine.
Mm.
But I'm aware that I don't want the audience to leave. So I push them to the edge of their seats to say, okay, I'm going to leave. And then I try to hold them. You know, in this dynamic of pushing them and keeping them, I find the inner rhythm of the film.
Oh, that's interesting because as an audience, there's a time that you think that you know all,
Yeah.
but then everything get a twist.
Yeah.
Um, One of the other things that I really like is how did you deal with in cinema? We usually see the frustration and all that happens in the protagonist inside. You can see it in dark places or little places or stuff like that, but here you put all that frustration and all that emotionality in open spaces, and I
Mhm.
found it beautiful because it's a contradiction. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Um, as you said, usually in cinema, when we want to show that bottled frustration or that self-reflection, that moment of thinking, we go to a dark place. We go to a suffocating place. It's usually in the closet. We go in the closet, right? In a dark space. I thought I want to reverse that because my characters also, when I self-reflect, I feel lonely. I feel extremely alone. So I thought, what if I put them in this vast landscape and they actually feel very small, right? And also, it would allow me to take the character out of the city. And in the city, you have this constant gaze of the society, this patriarchal system. these images of old men that looks at you on the flags, on the posters, on the frames in the schools, hospitals, office, everywhere, right? I try to take it all the way out, to the vistas, to the landscapes, and there provide him with a moment to think.
That was beautiful. And you just mentioned you dedicated this movie to your sisters, but you talk about the patriarchal part of uh, the structure of society, and I imagine more in where it's this happens. So, how did you start to thinking in the reproduction of the patriarchal part, and how was so important to you to tell us about it in this story?
I think it's very easy to blame individuals for what they do, and then we forget that the core of the problem is elsewhere. We all have become the product of this system. We have gone to school in this system. We have given the vocabulary that we speak about this reality with this system, by this system. So instead of focusing and giving guilt trips to individual characters, I wanted us to look at the entire system a little bit, and the psychology of this system. So in a way, it's the psychology of the politics and the politics of the psychology. That was what I was interested in looking. And in this system, men and women, we are both subjected to it. Of course, on the surface, when you look at it, men have an easier time, and they do. But at the end of the day, we all are victims of this system, and it's on us, all of us, to resist it, to change it, to look at it, at least to render the structure of it. Say, hey, look, this is the structure of how this patriarchy is reproduced. In my films, women are part of it as well, and they resist it as well. They call it out as well, right? Yeah, this is what I was interested in looking at.
Alireza, my time is up for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Fran. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti. Chao.